If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied the principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. My name is Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, editor, poet, and award-winning author of middle grade novel Jet Cooper, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
On today's episode, Melanie pitched Ronin so that we can study the premise. This 1998 film was directed by John Frankenheimer from a screenplay by screenwriters J.D. Zeek and David Mamet. Of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, click the stars. It is that simple. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Okay, Miss Melanie, how did you go with your study of the premise this week?
Well, I have to make a true confession because this week I was truly puzzled. When I saw Ronin way back when it was released in the late 90s, I swear the ending was different. I have a very distinct memory of the ending being different. It was darker, and it concluded with Deirdre being kidnapped by the IRA in revenge for Seamus's death. So I was completely thrown with the ending when I watched it this week, which upended my plans to write a great episode on the need to have a sense of your ending, especially when your ending isn't optimistic or cathartic. So I also mounted a great case for knowing how your complications and major crisis points drive towards a negative ending. But alas, my cunning plan hit its own complications because what I thought the ending was going to be was wrong. However, the points that I was making are still pertinent, and I've tweaked them slightly now that I've seen the alternative ending. So, right. The logline for Ronin is: a team of international special agents are hired to carry out a mysterious mission to steal a heavily guarded suitcase or briefcase wanted by the IRA and the Russian mafia. Now, I love this logline. I'm hooked straight away, but I'd make a single but powerful change. Instead of international special agents, I would actually use the phrase or the word mercenaries because it manages the expectations about the ensemble protagonists and who and what they are. And this goes back to a point that Valerie made last week in Hidden Figures about managing readers' or viewers' expectations. Now, the general formula for a logline is you've got a protagonist, the inciting incident, action, and also the antagonist. But let's just put a pin in that because there's something interesting about that once I go through and develop the premise for Ronin. So let's give the premise for Ronin a go using John Truby's requirements, which I've covered in previous episodes this season. So we'll just have a look at what his requirements are for a premise. Now, the characters are a group of international mercenaries with their own agendas. The inciting incident is that they are gathered together in Paris to plan a mission. The plot: they have to steal a mysterious suitcase that's sought by the Russian mafia and the IRA. And the outcome, or the sense of an ending: the death of a known IRA terrorist leads to peace in Northern Ireland because the case is captured by the CIA. Now, here's my attempt at a premise using the information above. A group of mercenaries are gathered in Paris by the IRA to steal a mysterious suitcase also wanted by the Russian mafia, but it's retrieved by the CIA. Now, the value of having a sense of your ending is reinforced in a movie like Ronin because the plot is complicated and there is plenty of ambiguity. And the ambiguity works in a movie like this because the world of realistic crime, terrorism, and intelligence agents is not rosy. The odds of good outcomes for the characters is pretty unlikely. There's double crosses, guns for hire, willingness to kill. All of these things combine to complicate the story and create a sense of ambiguity. So the so what for us is that you must have a clear sense of the ending you want at some point in your writing process, because this determines the progressive complications and major decision points in your story. Now, the other constraints at the surface level Ronin premise creates for the writers things like what type of characters you're going to have in your primary and secondary roles. What are they prepared to do? So what are their morals, their motivations or their causes? And that's a bit unknown in this story. What are the locations that you choose to have in your story? And that comes down to the seedy underworld in otherwise glamorous places. And it helps you create the rules of the world. So the premise does a lot in terms of determining aspects of your story, and it helps you make decisions about these sorts of things. But, and here's the kicker, Ronin isn't really about an ensemble cast or a group of mercenaries. It's about Sam, an undercover CIA operative. Now, this isn't revealed until the end, but all of the constraints that I mentioned above, or all of the parts of this story that I mentioned above, still stand. But what this means is that I have to revisit the premise based on Sam as the protagonist. And this is what that looks like. The character is Sam, a deep undercover CIA agent. The inciting incident is that he joins a group of mercenaries led by the IRA in Paris to plan a mission. The plot is that he must steal a mysterious suitcase that's sought by the Russian mafia and the IRA. And the outcome is that Sam kills Seamus, a significant IRA terrorist leader who is blocking peace negotiations between England and Sinn Féin. Now, this information is specific to Sam, and so the premise could be undercover agent Sam joins a group of IRA mercenaries to steal a suitcase from the Russian, but he kills the IRA leader who is blocking Northern Ireland peace talks. Now, what I find fascinating about Sam's premise is that most of this is hidden for the story. We have a sense that Sam isn't quite who he says he is, but there aren't any real significant clues about Seamus being his object of desire until Sam tells Deirdre to flee. But it does make sense in the context of the underbelly crime, the terrorism, and the intelligence operations world. But also note that the ending in both the premises, so the main story or sort of big picture story premise and Sam's premise, are similar. And that is important because there's a point where the two stories merge and Sam's story takes over. Now, let's go back to that log line and reconsider the log line in the context of the two premises. The log line also addresses the surface level action in the story. In fact, it contributes to covering up what the movie is really about. Now, as I was thinking about which premise I'd use to write a story like Ronin, I came up with an interesting idea. I'd actually use both. I'd use the first premise to create the surface level action of the ensemble cast, and then I'd use the one specific to Sam to maintain a sense of what I wanted that character to do. So I would have a clear understanding about Sam's object of desire because it is different from the mission. Sam wants Seamus, and this is what's hidden until the end. So I'd make sure I understood Sam's object of desire and his motivation, which is to assist peace negotiations. But I'd use one premise to hide the other. Now, this type of realization really lights up my plotting nerdiness, right? I because I like these types of stories and I like the subterfuge and all of the things that go on in espionage stories. So I'm probably going to think about this for years. This is going to go forward with me for years, and I'm going to think about how I can use this type of technique in future stories that I write. But I have no idea if this is what the writer of Ronin was thinking when he wrote the plot or the story and the screenplay. But it makes sense to me, especially in a spy story where you need to keep things hidden, but also give enough clues to keep the audience engaged. And I also think that it is an advanced approach to writing a story because you are writing two stories at the same time with one concealing the other. So that is how I've worked with the premise, going from a catastrophic, oh my God, the ending is different from what I expected, into thinking about how the story actually works and what makes sense from a premise point of view. So, Valerie, how did you go with the 4 types of protagonists this week?
Well, Melanie, I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure I fully understand what happened in this movie. There was a lot of shooting scenes and a lot of car chase scenes. And for me, that is particularly challenging because it's really hard. They don't hold my attention. Um, and I kept losing the plot. And so when I got to the end, it kind of felt like a gotcha ending. Not quite. It's not quite fair to say. But I got to the end and I went, well, I mean, okay. But you know, uh, I'm I'm struggling this week to separate the objective editor in me and the subjective moviegoer in me. I am, and it was a really busy week. So maybe if I had watched it 2 or 3 or 4 times, or 3 or 4 times, I might have appreciated it more. But on my first viewing, I was kind of relieved when it was over because there's a lot of car chase scenes. And,
I agree. There's a lot.
yeah,
And
there's a
there's
lot.
too much. Even for an action movie,
Yeah.
there's what I think there's too much.
It kept for me, it kept interrupting the story.
Yeah.
And now there will be people who absolutely love that in a film, so more power to you. For me, I kept zoning out and then having to make a conscious choice to re-engage with the movie. All right. Luckily, none of that impacts my study of the protagonist. Hooray! And, Melanie, you are right when you say that it is clear immediately that Sam is not quite who he says he is. We know there's something else going on there. I think he is still a textbook example of an anti-hero, though. Now, there will be people who, when they find out the ending, will consider him a hero, because he's a CIA agent and he's working toward ensuring peace and blah, blah, blah. But stick with me here. All right. With respect to the antihero, there's no standard definition of what this is, yet we all kind of know what it is. Like we can recognize it when we see it, but it's really hard to explain what it is. So I've heard an antihero described in a whole lot of different ways. One is the opposite of a hero. I don't know that I agree with that one. I think actually the antihero, and I think Ronin is a good case, a good argument for this. I think the antihero can actually be very close to a hero, depending on the presentation of them. Not 180 degrees is what I'm saying. Maybe 5 degrees. The antihero can also be the opposite of the reader or the audience. I think this one carries a lot more weight. The other way I've heard an antihero described is someone who is sort of a bad dude who only looks good in relation to the other bad dudes in the story. Now, I'm sure there are umpteen other definitions. Pick up your theory book and, I'm sure you'll find another one. but these are the ones that I keep coming back to. And I think they're all kind of right, and I think they're all kind of wrong. Because I think they're all very simplistic, and I think an anti-hero is not a simplistic type of character. They might be a constant character or not. Um, they can be highly nuanced or not. I don't think an anti-hero is a cardboard cutout of a character. I don't think they are simplistic characters. I think there's always something else going on with them, because I think an anti-hero always has some kind of an internal struggle, because they're trying to do right in some way when they are forced to do wrong in some way. And that makes them really interesting. So the way I kind of think of an anti-hero is this, and don't hold me to this definition because I am absolutely positive that it will evolve as I learn more and as I study more examples of antiheroes. And my study of antiheroes will really dive in if and when I decide to write an antihero story. If you are writing a story with an antihero, I strongly encourage you to study them and see when they are working and when they're not working. So here's how I think of an antihero. It's a character who, while being morally flexible, can have some kind of redeeming quality or a quality that makes them fascinating to the reader or to the audience. This character is always superior to the other characters in some way. That's the hero part of them, right? Yet they are still completely different from the audience or the reader. That's the anti part of them. Because I mean, maybe there's someone watching this movie who's like Sam, but not many. All right, so let's apply this idea of an antihero to Sam in the movie Ronin. Well, Sam is clearly better or superior than the other characters. This is obvious from, I mean, minute one of the movie. It's also obvious from the casting. It's Robert De Niro. I mean, let's be honest here now. Sam's, a quote unquote bad guy, right? He's not, um, he's not a CIA agent who's in a suit and tie working back in the office. He is gritty. He's out there in the field, and we don't know that he's CIA. I really like the term mercenary that you used, Melanie. I think that is spot on. And he's just like all the others, as far as we know, for most of the film. What we also know, though, is that he's way more skilled than all of the other guys. Now, all of the people assembled, arguably, are the best at what they do. Now, there's some question about that as the story goes on, and um, the people of the team turn out to be maybe not as good as they'd hoped. That said, the idea that these are the people brought together, they're brought there because they're really good at what they do. But Sam is still better than all of them. A couple of really quick examples that happen almost immediately. It's Sam who immediately sees the problem in Spence's plans, and Spence is played by the amazing Sean Bean. But he's not going to last in the movie because poor old Sean Bean, his characters never seem to last. Oh, I love Sean Bean. I wish he would hang around longer. I'm still not over the Game of Thrones treatment of Sean Bean, but anyway, moving on. I was going to say Sean is doing a plan. It's not Sean at all. It's his character, Spence. They have this whiteboard and they're putting a plan together for how to move forward. Spence draws a road and he says, we'll have two snipers, one on either side. Great, Bob's your uncle. Of all of the experts in that room, Sam is the only one who understands that Spence's plan is not going to work. Why? Because the location of those two particular snipers means that the snipers are going to kill each other. So it's not a good plan. And this is the thing that makes them all realize that Spence is not who he said he was. and that he is not a good member of the team, and Spence is out just like that. Nobody else picked up on that. It was Sam. Now, when they go to look at, this is very early in the film, they go to look at weapons, go to pick up some weapons. Sam is the one that understands that going under the bridge is a trap. He's the only one who understands that. The other characters, Spence, Vincent, and Larry, don't see it that way. Now, Vincent, to his credit, is wise enough to question why Sam is hesitant that they follow the French guys to the car that's under the bridge. A rapport begins to develop very quickly between Vincent and Sam, because Vincent is the one character who recognizes the superiority of Sam's ability, and he respects it and he listens to it. And as a result, he makes it through to the end of the movie when most people do not. Now, listen, I could spend an hour listing out all of the examples as to how at every turn Sam is smarter than the others. He's just better at what he does. Maybe it's because he was better trained, maybe because he's got more experience. We don't know why he's better. Again, it turns out he's CIA, but we don't know that. He makes remarks a couple of times through the film, I think they're all to Vincent, where he says, well, they say, or they tell me to, or they told me to do this. And Vincent will say, who's they? And Sam will say, oh, I don't remember, or it's just a saying, or something like that. Well, we're starting to guess that maybe it could be a formal organization, but we don't know for sure. Suffice it to say that at every single turn in this movie, Sam is superior to the other characters. Now, I also said that the antihero has some sort of redeeming quality, or a quality that makes him particularly fascinating to the audience or the reader. Sam's redeeming quality is that he wants to protect his teammates. He protects Vincent several times. He tries to protect the others as well. Like, for example, at the first meeting, he cautions Spence, right? Like when they're going to get the guns, but Spence refuses to listen, right? And Sam refuses to kill Deirdre when she double crosses them. Now, you could make an argument for this being a strength or a weakness, depending on how you want to see it. But even though Sam has no trouble shooting people, none whatsoever, his body count is extremely high by the end of the film. He doesn't kill his own team members. He tries to protect them. And if they would only listen to him, they might get through all this, like Vincent, right? Now, Sam, like I said, is definitely the opposite of the viewer or the audience member. Most people watching this movie are not rogue U.S. Intelligence agents who are also sharpshooters and expert drivers, capable of successfully conducting very high speed car chases through a foreign city. I mean, you just kind of have to suspend disbelief and go with it. Melanie, there's not a whole lot more I can say, to be honest. Um, I think the storytelling here is a bit thin. I would have liked more espionage. And, fewer car chases, fewer shooting scenes. But listen, I understand that those are genre conventions, and viewing audiences would certainly have expected to see that. So I'm absolutely willing to say that that's a personal preference for me, and that, this is not necessarily my type of movie, although I do enjoy espionage. Because here's what it is. The reason I love espionage, or really like espionage, is because you're forced to think, and it's got a puzzle you're forced to solve. And that was missing here. They didn't tell you enough throughout the whole film for you to be wondering what is Sam's game? Who is he? How is it? They just sort of dump it all at you at the end when they do the big reveal. Um, and and they didn't have time to sort of string us along with that because so much of the screen time is car chases and shootouts. And honestly, there are only so many times I can hear that tire squealing car sound effect before I tune out. And I kept tuning out and having to consciously remind myself to tune back in. Um, because there's not much story here. There's not much character development. So there's not much more I can say about Sam as an anti hero protagonist, except that, yeah, he is overt. He is pretty much an off the shelf version of an anti-hero. So if you are writing an anti-hero story, this actually would be a good movie for you to study because it's such a clear example. You could argue that he's a hero because he's CIA and his mission is about peace, but I can't buy that argument. But feel free to make it if you want. Melanie, what are your final thoughts about the premise as it relates to Ronin?
Well, I agree with you, first of all, that Sam is an anti-hero because there's things about him that are really morally grey would be one way to describe it. But he's one of those people that goes in and does the things that other people don't want to do so they can keep their hands clean. So you have to have a level of moral flexibility about being able to do those things. So I agree. I agree. He's an anti-hero. So hadn't thought about that either. So I'm glad you presented that as a case because, yeah, thinking about him as a hero did not sit well and did not seem right to me at all either.
A
All
hero
right. So
wouldn't go into a room and shoot people up. Like,
no.
that's not what the hero does. Anti-hero will do it, but the hero is not. A hero is trying to preserve life at every turn. An
Yes.
anti-hero, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that fits Sam far more. That fits him much better. Yeah. Okay. My final thoughts on the premises in Ronin. A premise is useful not only as a whole story planning and writing tool, it can be used in stories where the main plot hides what is really going on. And this is a great tool for mysteries or spy stories where the writer wants to hide the motivations of the main character.
Alrighty, well, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss Birds of Prey. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want us to review your query letter and your first 10 pages writing sample, go to storynerd.ca for all the details about how to submit. To join my inner circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And if you do that, when we review the query letters and first 10 pages writing samples, you'll get copies of them so that you can read them and follow along and get all the benefit of our feedback. For more information about Melanie's books, visit melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory does not have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.